Thank you for sticking around today. We are the final panel, and I'm Sue Merrick. I'm the editorial director at Ookla. Covered the telecom space for about 30 years as a journalist. Moved over to Ookla a couple years ago. If you're not familiar with Ookla, we're a data company. We measure network speeds and network performance. And I'm going to structure this starting out. I've got questions. I will open it up in the last 10 minutes or so to questions from the audience. So as you're sitting there listening to the discussion, please be thinking of questions you'd like to ask. And so our panel today is from competition to coopetition, building wireline and wireless networks. And our panelists kind of do a variety of these things. So we have Vincent. He's Vincent Sabatier. He's the CEO of BlueSurf. Next to Vincent is Alex Freilichman.
That's better.
I knew I would get it. He is the Vice President of Sales at Lightlinks. Then we have Matt Larson, owner and CEO of VistaBeam, and Brian Horton, who's the Senior Director of Wireless Business at CCI Systems. So to kind of set the stage, why don't each of you just briefly explain to the audience what your company does and how it fits into this panel? Vincent?
So, yes, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to the organizers. It's a pleasure to be here today. And so BlueSurf is, with this mother company, has more than 35 years in fixed wireless, both in Europe and in the US. And at BlueSurf, we try to integrate our business vertically. So we are trying to design, build, operate, and commercialize networks, mostly for households.
And mostly fixed wireless.
Mostly fixed wireless. We started with that. We operate in different spectrum, unlicensed and licensed.
Okay.
Both CBRS and EBS, and we started to diversify on the fiber.
So you are starting to deploy fiber. Okay,
yes.
Great. Alex.
So Alex Freilichman, thank you again for inviting as well. This event is awesome. Food and coffee is amazing. So what Lightlinks does, we are a smart fiber company. We're the company that becomes your force multiplier in a fiber plant construction. So we've developed a smart fiber technology, put a patent around it. There are several more in queue. This is something that's going to change every single one of your lives. So get ready.
Get
Very
ready.
Cool stuff.
Okay, we'll have to find out more about smart fiber versus dumb fiber. Great. Matt.
I'm Matt Larson. I'm CEO of VistaBeam. We're a fixed wireless and fiber provider covering 60,000 very rural square miles of western Nebraska, eastern Wyoming, northern Colorado. We started out, primarily just doing fixed wireless, and now we have a pretty good blend of fiber in there. And going forward, a big part of our intention is to continue building out both and upgrading both fixed wireless and fiber technologies to deliver the best services we can to our customers the most efficient way possible.
Right. And I'm from northern Colorado, northeastern Colorado, so
Wait,
I know how
which one?
Fort Morgan.
Fort Morgan.
I know how rural that is. Lots of tumbleweeds.
The Arrow territory. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Brian.
Hi, my name is Brian Horton. I'm with CCI Wireless for 67 years. CCI, formerly known as Cable Constructors Incorporated, rebranded as CCI, was only a wireline soft services provider, providing engineering and splicing and joint use and permitting and GIS services around the country. Well, this past May, CCI bought my company, Total Site Services, and we are and now we're a wireless carrier expertise company with site acquisition, with construction management, with professional engineering on the tower side of things. So we truly are merging the one side of the fence to the other, and I'm a big part of that. So I was asked to be a part of this panel to discuss the internal synergies about from competition to coopetition and helping bridge the gap between wireline and wireless, whether it be fixed wireless or carrier wireless or both, and depending on whether it's a cable company, a fiber company, or a cellular company, either way. So,
And
so
so
that's,
you can talk about the challenges with both, right?
internally, yes, I can talk about the challenges in merging those two
Deployment
different
challenges with
aspects of the
both.
company.
Okay.
It's been 7 months now, so we're working through it, but it all boils down to one thing, Sue. Everybody's got to work together for it to work properly. So, but we'll get to that. So anyway, sorry.
So I know there's already been a lot of discussion about BEAD, but let's just kind of briefly talk about how the revised BEAD, which allowed for more of a tech-neutral approach, doesn't favor fiber as it initially did. And so now states are able to incorporate fixed wireless, satellite, and into their BEAD proposals. And I guess today's news is that 18 proposals have been approved by the NTIA. Sorry. You know, how has that changed? Has that changed what you do? Or has that changed your business with these this new kind of revisions to the original BEAD?
Yeah, from my point of view, it was very welcome to see fixed wireless get a little bit more consideration. The super heavy fiber focus was pretty disturbing in a lot of ways for me. I'm still very much favor fixed wireless in a lot of different cases, especially when we're talking about rural. But the execution was very uneven. So we're across 3 different states, and they've all gone very different directions. Nebraska ended up only using 11% of their funding. Fixed wireless got most of the money because they went through and found out that fiber just wasn't going to be viable, even with BEAD support, for a huge chunk of the state. Wyoming did a really good job of kind of balancing between. They worked with us a lot to kind of get fixed wireless into places that were otherwise going to go to satellite, and places that should have been on fixed wireless. Now, there's absolutely a role for all 3, but you know, putting the right tool for the right job, I felt like Wyoming did a really good job of kind of figuring out where that's at. And I think as a result, they're one of the states that got approved today. So we're really looking forward to going forward with that. And then Colorado, the 3rd state, pretty much maintained a fiber heavy focus all the way through. They did open it up to fixed wireless. There was just a smattering of it. But the circumstances were such that it didn't make sense for us to do fixed wireless. We just stuck with fiber there. So BEAD is not the way I would have put the program together, but hopefully we're at a point
Those
where
changes apparently helped you. And it's interesting to know that the states work pretty closely with you, or at least some of them.
it felt like they did. You know, like I said, I'm much more a believer in like infrastructure banks. The idea of giving out this once in a generation giant pile of money kind of creates this problem where the money comes out at the same time, and then it creates supply problems, it creates labor problems. It makes the projects way, way more expensive to deploy. We've seen 4 years of delay. I would rather see something like an infrastructure bank type deal where the companies that are ready to execute would have access to capital to go out and execute, and then would have access to more capital depending on how well they execute.
That's interesting.
If I may
Brian,
add,
yeah, Brian, do you have a
well,
thought
Sue,
on?
yeah, actually, absolutely. The very nature of the program is to provide internet to everybody in the country. And there's a right way to do it for different people. And that right way is either fixed wireless and or maybe fiber and or maybe low Earth orbit satellite. But opening the doors up to that right way, getting back to the focal point of the overall program, that's provide internet to every person in the country, every home in the country. The only way to do that properly is by opening it up and bringing fixed wireless into the game plan. Much like my friend on my left here, Matt's discussed, Colorado stayed away from fixed wireless. So there was but there was also a lot less BAUs in Colorado to get internet too. So Montana's 89,000 people are trying to get internet too. Other states in the country have a lot more people that need it. And in states like Montana or Wyoming or Idaho, mountainous regions, you have to have a combination of everything. You can't get fiber everywhere. So you're automatically disqualifying a lot of those people from a bettering their lives and based on the whole premise of the program.
Alex, okay, smart fiber.
No,
How do you feel about this?
So my background, I come from a wireless industry, 20 years in wireless, a lot in fixed wireless access, specifically LTE. So in general, I do like mixed bag. You have to use the right technology for the right application. I'm a big proponent of this. The issue that I have with changes to the BEAD program is it began incentivizing not necessarily the best technology because the bias was towards the price. And fiber obviously
It's expensive.
is expensive to deploy. And then there is another problem with the diminishing point of return. It costs so much dollars to connect the house. Some house may be more expensive, less expensive, but at the end of the day, there is real cost. Obviously, fixed wireless is fantastic because you can access the customers easier. LEO carries certain nuances, even though it's probably the lowest cost. But I liked some aspects of changes. Others, I think, were long-term will be detrimental.
Vincent, you.
So there is a policy aspect to it, and then there is a practical aspect to it.
Yep.
So BEAD is about one tier of service. It's a 125. This is what we call internet broadband now.
100 down.
And 25 up.
20 up.
Yeah. So
I
this
think
is
20.
what we call broadband now, right?
Right.
On
That's
this,
FCC's
on this
definition.
iteration, this is what is broadband, 125. And so clearly 125 can be met with the wireless technology and the satellite technology. So if you need a quick access, a quick solution at this tier, assuming people really need this tier, it's a good idea to add this option. However, if you have a long-term policy in mind, you can look at what France did, for example. They started a full fiber program in 2012, and in 10 years it was done. So now 95% of the locations in France are covered with fiber.
Right. That's a small country. And
Yeah, it's
compared
a
to the
small
landmass
country,
of the US.
but it was 15 billion, so maybe it would cost us 100 billion, but the 42 billion of bids will not be enough. You know, we need to go back into it. So you could say, I do fiber everywhere, including in the mountains, because they did it in the mountains as well. So from a practical standpoint, yes, the fiber, I think, is an end game, right? There is a lot of growth potential, it's stable. There is no operational cost compared to the wireless system. The fiber works very well by itself. It's amazing. And the wireless has a lot of problems. You know, there are interference problems, more and more, which the regulator is struggling to fight against. You have the weather events, which are becoming more frequent and more important. So, for example, in a thunderstorm, we have recorded up to 60 lightning strike, 60 in a minute. That means 1 a second. So if you're under one of these clouds with your towers, you're very likely to lose 5 or 6 towers in one shot. So, and those events in the Midwest especially are becoming more and more prevalent. So that's another problem with
Okay,
wireless.
I think we have some disagreement.
And then the last thing is the energy. The fiber doesn't use any energy, right? Because there is nearly no friction in the glass, while the radio on top of the towers, they use more and more energy. So they are more vulnerable to energy and to the increase in energy cost, which is going to happen. So I think the OPEX in wireless is going to go up, while the OPEX in fiber will remain the same.
Okay.
I'll take the other side of that. I've seen, we're doing both, and fiber has a lot of hidden OPEX, having to deal with locates, having to deal with cuts, having to deal with utility poles. We were in an area where a storm came through and took out 4,000 utility poles. There's a lot of OPEX in fiber, so you can't just say that there's not there. And like when it comes to like lightning, like we've had decades to figure out how to deal with lightning strikes and grounding, and that only takes out the weak operators. So you know that's not really. There is some weather consideration, but
When you say that a utility pole, so are you deploying aerial fiber?
yes,
Okay.
we're doing both.
And trenching. Okay, right? Isn't that That's
So
the
we-
in-ground.
We're doing both underground and aerial fiber.
Okay.
We are just doing underground.
You're just doing in the ground.
Underground.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a final question, or final issue there about availability of material.
Well, yeah, there was I wanted to follow up because I think Matt brought up supply chain when
Right.
you're opening the floodgates.
Sure.
Are you seeing full supply chain or are you anticipating supply chain problems?
I don't see any problems right now,
Okay.
but we've also had, everybody got all geared up for BEAD and
Yeah,
built a bunch of inventory and then nothing happened for the last 4 years.
so they've got some warehouses
So-
full of stuff.
Well, I think a lot of that has probably worked its way out of the system. I'm curious to see what happens going forward.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a challenge, but the problem with fiber isn't really materials. The problem with fiber is labor, cost of labor.
The problem that I see with fixed wireless is there's really only one or two providers of the equipment that goes on the pole, Toronto or smaller other companies.
There's smaller vendors
There's not
that
enough.
do the FWA gear.
And so the price consciousness of that comes into play at that point. So, and so basically creating a competitive situation is
So
more
supply
beneficial to the
chain maybe on
client.
the fixed
100%.
wireless side.
100%.
Could be. Have you noticed, so we saw, kind of, like you said, everyone ramped up for BEAD, then the new administration came in, there were changes to BEAD, people had to redo their application. So are you seeing that maybe there's been a stall or do you think there's been kind of a stalled build out in broadband while people were waiting for BEAD to be figured out? Or did you see continued deployments? Anybody?
Yeah, so every time when government introduces a funding package, like same thing happened with CAF, same thing happened with RDOF, same thing happened with BEAD, and by the way, CAF twice. There was a pause in purchasing, a good pause, a year or two. If you guys remember, I can go back into 2008. If anybody remembers programs called BTOP and Beep. Yeah, exactly. That thing, it was first time when broadband was subsidized in the United States, and I remember companies going out of business in 2009 and 2010, when money still was not there. So it was kind of a learning curve of the other side of public dollars. So what you saw with BEAD in recent years is companies began ramping up. We're talking about thousands of miles of fiber. So it's not like you can build it overnight. You have to build a team. You have to build infrastructure. You have only so many years to implement the project. So you have an organization that's ramping up their staff, and nothing happens. Because it does take time to onboard. And this is the sad reality that we see today, that a bunch of splicers are sitting without a job, by the way. So, yeah.
So you're seeing a stall?
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
So on the carrier side, though,
Yeah,
not at all.
that's what I was thinking.
Carrier build plans they're exploding. They're still doing their C-band changeouts, their mid-band antennas installations and so forth. That has not slowed a bit. And even though they're now all trying to get into the wireline side of things, Verizon and T-Mobile, for example, and
The big
AT&T.
providers are still building, and
100%.
anybody with private equity funding, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what, yeah. Ookla, we do a state broadband report, and I did not see a slowdown in fiber or broadband expansion, but I did see more urban than rural, definitely. I mean, so we see a trend where urban broadband speeds are going up, rural broadband not necessarily.
I mean, you have a higher density of population in urban areas, so it's much easier for ISP to recoup the costs.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, urban, and also in urban areas, you're going to see more people because the cost of deploying it, the ROI on those fiber deployments are better, so that's where they're building. So for the ISPs that are blending fixed wireless and fiber assets together, kind of I think this question was maybe asked this morning. So, but Matt, I'd like your take. Like, how do you decide where you're going to build what?
So it's a multivariate equation. So you look at a situation where, we've got density. There's a certain density that would make sense to do fiber. So that's one component. The next component is what the right-of-way looks like and what's available. If we can do aerial in town, that's like kind of an ideal scenario. I mean, the ideal scenario is like greenfield development, and they're just putting the stuff in, and it's like, yeah, we'll throw
When they're
that
building,
in
yeah.
with it.
That doesn't happen
But
very
the
often.
next most ideal scenario is going to a town that is willing to work with you and doesn't have a disaster pole infrastructure that you can go put stuff up on the poles. That's the least expensive way to put it up. In town, going on poles is a lot cheaper and generally does not have nearly as many issues as doing rural aerial. Rural area, you have a little bit of exposure to the big storms that take down like long rows of poles. So, you know, if we can do that, that's great. And then the other factor is competition, is kind of looking at what's out there. So we tend to go into very small towns. I think the biggest deployment we're just finishing up is like 1,800 locations. That's like a neighborhood for some people. That's an entire town where we're at. So we've gone into towns. We just finished one in a town of 300 people. And so we have to kind of look at what the variables are to decide what we want to do. If there's competition, then yeah, we're probably not going to do fiber in an area like that if there's somebody already doing fiber. I've seen a situation, we built fiber in, Lumen put fiber in 3 months later. They were paid by the state USF fund to do it, and we knew they were doing it, but we had a head start, so we went ahead. And then Spectrum just recently overbuilt fiber in the same town of 540 homes.
Wow.
Why? It doesn't make any sense.
That
But
makes a lot of sense.
they obviously weren't looking at they were using 5-year-old demographics that said there was nothing there. So they obviously weren't in touch with the market. So there's other situations. We also have service around towns where they already have fiber. The poles are kind of full. We will do millimeter wave wireless. So for example, I have 2 gig millimeter wave wireless at my house and the fiber provider only has 1 gig. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put up low cost millimeter wave. My cost per house passed is $20 per home. So why wouldn't you just do that? Because we need very little to make it make sense. So we will deploy fixed wireless everywhere. We'll only put fiber into places where we have the good combination of density and inexpensive right of way and hopefully friendly permitting. That's the other thing with underground is we've seen a lot of towns that are really going heavy after the permitting process as a revenue source. Even when it comes to drops, I've heard of a town in Colorado that's charging, it's $800 worth of labor just to get the permit to put the drop in. That's before you put the drop in or pay for any of the materials.
Okay, yeah, they're seeing a revenue opportunity, I guess. So I guess, Alex, do you have a view with your customers? I know you do fiber, but is there ever like an option cost prohibitive? You mentioned that.
No, there is, obviously, dollar will drive final decision often enough. Do they go aerial, do they go underground, or they shift to a different technology? And you know, we had several of these. State of Ohio, for example, with latest bid, initially it was, you know, it had good fiber presence. And after the round 2, don't quote me, but
Don't quote you. You
no,
are
don't
on a
quote me
panel.
on the numbers, but something like only about 700, less than a million or something like that went towards fiber. That's it. The rest, went
Satellite.
which was, you know, at the end of the day, these are business decisions that states make based on decisions and logic.
Do you see any, since you're fiber, do you see any situations where fiber will become less expensive to deploy? I mean, is there new technology?
This is the goal. So Matt alluded, fiber construction is expensive. Yes, it is. But cost of material is only, on average, 10 to 15% of the project cost. If machine really well oiled, okay, 20%. The rest of the cost is in the labor, in the construction. So, and that's the direction we took with Lightlinks is develop a mechanism, a way, a technology, a system that can impact fiber construction cost in a meaningful way. So to answer your question, yes, and we're the first ones that do something that nobody else did, we find a lot of costs are associated due to human inefficiencies. Yes, municipalities make ready, like those things can really throw you off. But human inefficiencies, idle labor, wasted material, all those cost money. And if you ask how much, nobody can tell you. So with our technology, we're able to bring in empirical data and start optimize this process. And as we continue to grow, as more people learn about the smart fiber, they're able to start changing the dynamics of oh, maybe it makes sense to do the fiber.
And since you also argued that fiber is the better technology, what do you see what can you do to cut those costs or reduce the costs to deployment?
Yeah, first of all, it's a business case, and the business case is associated with a rate of return over a certain period of time. So depending on how you finance it, you will have to return the money more quickly. But the advantage of fiber is that it's a long-term asset. It's typically 30 years or 40, even 50 years. While we've been in the wireless world for, I tell you, 35 years in Europe. And so we've seen all the technologies evolution, starting with Wi-Fi, then Alvarion, we used, how is it called, WiMAX, then 4G LTE, then 5G, then 5G NR, and now we are talking about 6G. So the problem with wireless is that, yeah, you have the best solution at the moment, but 3 years later, you have a solution which is 4 times more powerful. Okay, so a new guy comes in, the towers already exist, the fiber is already on the tower, okay? And so you deploy the latest equipment and you fry the previous
So you
guy.
don't have to keep retrenching to build new fiber.
Exactly.
Once it's in the ground,
But
it's initially a lot of pain.
Exactly. So if you are patient enough to accept that it's a longer return on the capex, then it's the best solution. And I think that for the government, from the policy standpoint, except if there is really an emergency, that should be the way to go. Because this will give the business case more time for return, unlike private funding.
Okay. Brian, did you have your sitting
I
up,
just wanted to say a comment on that. I mean, we're only looking at it from the broadband perspective here, though. You have to take into account the carrier aspect of it, too, and the wireless part of it as a whole. And much like you mentioned, 5G, 5GNR, 6G, that's driven because of cellular phones in people's hands. It's not the internet on their computer, or it's not their cable television. So that's the whole other part of this conversation that is bridging the competition and making it co-opetition based on the topic of this conversation. Right. So it has to be taken into account. The fact that technology is changing on towers every 3 years because it's being driven by population's demand of that. I want better VR. I want to be able to have do surgery on a patient from 10,000 miles away, whatever. That type of thing.
Which never happens.
Well, exactly, right? So
that's like,
but the whole point is,
it's malpractice.
People are making decisions now on what their handheld device can offer them, where they live, where they go to college. How that communication gets to them is besides the point. It's all based on subscribers.
Right.
It's all based on subscribers, whether it's an internet subscriber at home or a cellular subscriber or both. So that also has to be taken into account. I agree with what you're saying, Vincent, but I also think there's more to it from the perspective of if we really truly want to bridge this gap between, or I don't want to call it a gap, but wireline to wireless, everybody's got to start thinking in holistically, not categorically. And that's my comment to that.
Okay, that's good. Well, I would like to open it up to questions from the audience. I have plenty more. Yes, sir.
So talk a little bit about open access networks and shared facilities, whether it's wireless and wireless or wireless and wireline, and whether you see that as a viable business model going forward as we try to build out to more areas.
Yeah, so I know we're working on a group to do basically open access on fixed wireless networks using Tirana. Now, that's something that the cell carriers have been doing roaming across their networks for decades. So we're working on something that could do that. Some of the new fixed wireless systems have the ability to support multiple operators. So that's an interesting feature. And I think that could potentially open up a lot more capacity where traditionally you had the cable guys, well, they don't open their networks. The telephone people in the States do not open their networks up. In Europe, I know they do. That's a big part of the model there. But fixed wireless operators never really had the opportunity to do that. And now I think that opportunity is coming to almost establish another carrier of broadband that could have a pretty big coverage area relatively quickly. And I know a lot of the independent wireless ISPs are also doing fiber. And we've already seen open access have the ability to do some things in fiber. Technically, there's a lot of stuff there that makes sense. From a business case, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be on some of those networks. So I think we're going to start to see a little opening up there of, I think there's a lot of innovation that can be unlocked where you have companies that specialize in customer service in a specific area, or maybe you have like some certain niche type markets where you've got a group that wants to go in and they can sell and support broadband in an area, but they aren't really good at building a network. They can buy capacity on this, and all of a sudden, now we've got the ability for this particular group to serve. So in a lot of ways, there's lots of all these independent wireless ISPs all over the country that instead of having to go back and rebuild their network, every 5 years, they can just buy access from an open access.
So they can expand their footprint. Because I think I had a statistic, WISPA says there's like 2,000 wireless ISPs in the US, and that seems like a large number. I was wondering if there was consolidation, but the kind of scenario you're describing is where I could expand my footprint to other markets using an existing network, but my brand, or is it more roaming?
It's an interesting perspective about expanding into other markets. I don't look at it as a way to expand into new markets. I want to do the best job taking care of the customers in my market. So if I'm an operator and I have a lot of unupgraded towers, and if somebody came in and upgraded those towers, I'm not so worried about expanding my footprint out into somewhere else. I want to make sure that I get every customer I possibly can in my network. Because I can't compete with T-Mobile, I can't compete with AT&T on a national basis, but I can absolutely kick the crap out of them in the local market. So what I want to do is make sure that I keep as many of my customers in my service area as I can, because they can't provide the same level of service that they do.
Right.
A company that's encouraging self-install and remote take care of everything is never going to win versus a company that will actually come to your house and make sure everything works really well and really takes care of the customer. So I'm not so worried about expanding my market. I'm more interested in making sure that nobody else can compete with me.
Okay.
At that level.
And when you talked about that 2 gig speed on millimeter wave, was that licensed? And
That was actually unlicensed, 60 gigahertz.
So
an interesting thing. So there's a big deal about licensed versus unlicensed spectrum.
That's what I kind of wanted to touch on.
Real quick, one of the interesting things and why we always talk about Tirana is kind of like the equivalent of Bose noise canceling headphones. If you've ever used those and it kind of makes everything quiet, that is what Tirana does with interference. So the thing that's so magical about it.
So you don't get concerned about unlicensed interference on unlicensed.
What's that?
So with that, you're not as concerned about using unlicensed spectrum, because one of the criticisms of unlicensed is interference.
Exactly. But a lot of those criticisms are driven by companies that have licensed spectrum that they've paid a lot of money for, and they need to maintain the asset value of their licensed spectrum. So it doesn't look good for that asset when somebody comes in with a product that uses unlicensed spectrum and outperforms their licensed spectrum. So that's why you see those arguments. So that's the main reason why Tirana is very kind of magic in that way. The other side of that is also that it removes licensed spectrum is expensive, so you lock out an entire group of operators from being able to use it. But unlicensed spectrum is accessible. So you have more economic vitality because you're not limited to like 3 or 4 carriers that are using it.
Vincent can speak up of interference in a licensed spectrum.
Yes.
I don't know how much money it costs you, but
Yes. So
what
yeah,
Tarana did is quite amazing. It's not a magic bullet, but they took technology to quite a very different level.
And real quick, sorry, one real quick thing about millimeter wave. What's really interesting about millimeter wave is it has a very small footprint. So one of the things is like when you have spectrum that goes further out, then yeah, you have more coverage, but you also have more potential for interference.
So that's where this arrangement with wholesale would, especially at millimeter wave, where you don't have a very big footprint with, right?
Well, like per tower, you're only
tower.
covering like a mile.
Right.
But if you take like this big, 10 mile by 10 mile area, if you have spectrum that goes out 10 miles, you put one tower in the middle of it, but you have limited capacity. But with millimeter wave, if you're only covering 1 mile, even if you leave a mile in between, you can put 10 towers in there, then you get that density, then you get that ability to match up with fiber speeds.
Okay.
yes.
Would you like to talk
So,
about your?
yeah, initially we started with unlicensed and it was working well because we were mostly in rural area and we were the only one, of course, because there was no market for one, so for two it would be even more difficult. So you are less contested in rural areas with unlicensed, and so you have a lot of spectrum. You can have 100 megahertz if you want, which is what you need to deliver the speed you are talking about. In the licensed spectrum, it's very difficult and very costly to aggregate 100 megahertz. I don't know a single WISP, maybe there are some in the nation, but I don't know a single WISP who has 100 megahertz of licensed spectrum of contiguous. Maybe 20, maybe 50, but 100 of licensed spectrum is very difficult.
Yeah.
And with CBRS, you cannot go beyond 40 with power. So the advantage of a license is, especially in rural areas, is that you are alone and you have a lot of spectrum. So that's invaluable. And most likely you are not going to be interfered with. And on the other side, licensed spectrum is expensive and there are interferences, that are very difficult to manage. We've been interfered with by a major carrier for 5 years now, and we still haven't resolved
You aren't
the
able to,
situation.
and that is in licensed spectrum.
And this
you're
is in
having a
licensed
problem.
spectrum. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, we do.
Barlow, maybe you could offer services for Vincent.
So we heard T-Mobile this morning. I don't know if you sat through
Yes.
talking. If you haven't heard of, you've seen T-Mobile in the other carriers offering fixed. So y'all are in the same business, but you're doing it in a bunch of different ways than they are. What makes y'all, your technology better? And do you think that T-Mobile is going to, and the rest of them are going to dominate? So we just have 3 carriers dominating all fixed wireless. All basically fixed, using wireline and wireless. Where they just take their technology and take all your customers.
Yeah, are you threatened by T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T?
Coming from a LTE manufacturing, if I could just set the ground for conversation, guys will. T-Mobile carriers, they use 3GPP-based system that is built around mobility. So when we talk about internet bandwidth, you can look at it as an amount. Is it 10, 20, 50, 100 megabits, whatever that number is, and then there is a latency. So at the end of the day, an end user who has no idea about the technology, the way that they measure quality of internet service provider bandwidth is my internet good or bad? That's it. Does it buffer or not? They don't care how it's really being delivered. Mobile systems, by just the nature of it, they have gaps between the frames. So the bandwidth consistency is not the same as purpose-built systems, for example, like Tarana. So the quality of bandwidth coming out of the Tarana is different versus, let's say, 4G or 5G Node B or G Node B from T-Mobile to use these guys. So at the end of the day, there's going to be a saturation point where 3GPP going to start providing delays. Customer will be not happy, while Tarana will continue to provide consistent bandwidth. So there is a real problem with what you're asking. Yes, and they're coming in very aggressively priced. That's also another reason to make a decision. But when people are using, when they do need quality, consistent bandwidth, questions of where that bandwidth is coming from gonna surface.
So I have a different take. If you take the 5G system, the 5G 3GPP, which only few WISP are using because it's very expensive and very complex to handle. But you take the 5G NR, there are some new innovations like slicing, network slicing, and I think this is what made T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T being able to provide both mobile and fixed services. Is basically they can split the network in two.
I don't know that they're using network slicing for this, but
I don't know, but in any case, when you have 200 megahertz of licensed spectrum and you deploy 5G technology and you have a national network, you have a tremendous advantage.
they're using extra capacity, and it's where they have extra capacity. They really map it out really closely, I believe.
Yeah.
Vince, I'm sorry, Matt.
Well, it's their technology is not the advantage. I mean, that's the thing. And the keynote this morning was basically this wonderful PR representation of all these things. You know, when I look at it as cultural appropriation of the work that WISPs have been doing for the last 25 years. They act like they just discovered, oh, there was 0% market share. No, there was a couple thousand of us that have been out there doing this for 2 decades and have been learning and developing our process of how to go out and compete. So, you know, yeah, T-Mobile's putting pressure on operators, and you know, that's the downside of having competition. But the upside of having competition is figuring out how to build yourself up to where you really take good care of the customer. You know, they can talk about being the Un-carrier, but like I said earlier, they're sending a radio to you. You have to put it in yourself. If something goes wrong, yeah, you can call the call center, and you know it makes great slides, but call center work is really hard, and there is no substitute sometimes for getting somebody out there to fix the problem. And I think ultimately, you know, yeah, they're going to compete. It's going to cut into our growth. They're subsidizing broadband by selling expensive cell phone service. So, you know, this whole thing, the whole 3GPP is set up to take care of mobile first and fixed wireless second.
You're right.
And we're building a network that is just to take care of fixed wireless. Well, we're taking care of cell phones too, because I think 85% of their traffic runs over Wi-Fi anyway. So that's the other side of it, is somebody that comes home and their cell phone's running on Wi-Fi through their fixed wireless connection, when before it's been running through their cable connection or the fiber connection or the WISP connection. You know, that deal starts to build up, you know, and then they have to resort to stuff like slicing, which is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm not an engineer, but it's like, you can slice it up, it's still the same capacity there. And we've been doing that sort of thing at the network level anyway. It's like that's not innovation, that's PR. So I'm concerned that T-Mobile has the ability to outmarket us on a national level, and they have the ability to cut price a long ways on, you know, for an extended period of time. But eventually the stockholders want their return. Mm-hmm. And they can price lock all they want, but I've seen lots of price locks turn into price increases through other ways. So it's a matter of taking care of the customer, putting the customer first, and actually doing that, not just saying it, is
If you
what will
remember
last.
when T-Mobile bought Sprint, they were forced to sell off half the assets and keep a 4th carrier. So 3 carriers is probably not a concern from an FCC perspective. Also, if you consider what happened with Dish and then Boost or wherever they are now, they just lost all their bandwidth to AT&T apparently. So, but I think customers are smarter than we give them credit for, especially the younger generation who spend their lives on their phone. So for them, it's all about speed, no latency, upload speeds, download speeds. It's all about efficiency, and what network is going to run is my iPhone 37 going to run the best on? That's all they care about. So whether that's T-Mobile that outmarkets the competition to get that client or not, you can't necessarily project they can, because you have to take into account the intelligence of today's younger generation. They're the ones demanding the faster speeds. They're the ones demanding, I'm not going to go to this college unless you have this data speed for me. Cities are going to lose population if they don't provide the infrastructure for the fast speeds that are needed that this younger generation requires. So I think they're smarter than we give them credit for, and I think that'll dictate what really truly happens when the big three come swooping in with their marketing money, but they can't follow through on the quality that's required.
I think we're out of time. I think we've gone over, but thank you for sticking around. There will be cocktails in the exhibit hall, starting right now, probably already started, and tomorrow sessions get going at 8:30 a.m. Great, thank you. Thanks, panelists.